All Hit Radio.
Welcome to the X Zone, a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. Now, here's your host, Rob McConnell.
Welcome to the X Zone, everyone. As you know, for the last 14 years or 20 years, no matter how long you've been watching or listening to us, my name's Rob McConnell. We're coming to you from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Worldwide toll-free 1-800-610-7035. My email address is xzone@xzoneradiotv.com. On all social media sites, X Zone Radio TV, and our main website, where you can listen to the X Zone 7/24/365, is www.xzoneradiotv.com. My guest this hour is a gentleman we've had the pleasure of having on the show before. Dr. David Gruder is his name, and he is a 9-award-winning leader, peak performance psychologist, and cultural architect who we in the media referred to as America's integrity expert. This goes back all the way to 2008, Exonation. Now in his 4th decade as an internationally acclaimed book author, activational speaker, trainer, facilitator, consultant, and a trusted advisor, he has been featured in multiple hundreds of media interviews and articles, including Forbes, as well as here in the X Zone. In addition to being the Chief Integrity and Collaboration Officer for the Integrity Cultural System, Dr. Gruder is a lead facility for the California Institute for Human Science and a board member and co-head of the faculty for CEO Space International, the world's oldest and largest entrepreneur development organization. And his main website is www.davidgruder.com. And joining me from the beautiful state of California via Skype is Dr. Gruder. And Dave, always good seeing you, my friend. How have you been?
I've been really well, thanks, Rob. It's wonderful to see you again. It's been too long, and I'm so glad to be back with you on your show.
First of all, my friend, the very best to you and your family in this year, 2015. I believe that in 2015 we're going to see so many positive things happen. But I think there's a few things that we as a human race have to overcome, and that is terrorism. It's you know, like even today, ISIS released a 22-minute video of an act that no human can even fathom. So we're not going to get into this. All I can say is to the Jordanian pilot's family and to the people of Jordan, our thoughts and our prayers are with you all. David, we've seen it in Paris. We've seen it 9/11. Here in Canada, we had the attack at the Parliament going back a couple of months ago. It seems as if the world in a certain faction is going wacky. One time I thought maybe the aliens had done too many anal probes on them, but I ruled that out. Then I thought maybe something in the water. I had to rule that out. I thought maybe the chemtrails. I had to rule that out. Then I thought of demonic possession. I had to rule that out. So David, as a leading psychologist and our friend, the integrity expert, what in the name of Sam hell is going on?
Well, it may sound a little bit odd, but what I see going on is the expansion and the hideousness of terrorism directly reflecting and mirroring the expansion and hideousness of ideological and political polarization.
All right, for our listeners who may be a little confused by what you just said, explain it to them.
I thought you'd never ask. So, you know, if it's all right with you, I'd like to explain more by starting with a definition of what terrorism is.
Okay, why don't we do this? I've got to come to a commercial break in about a minute and a half, and I don't want you to start and then for me have to say, well, hold on, David, we've got to take a break. Terrorism, the psychology of terrorism is our topic this hour, X-Zone Nation. People are walking around the world on eggshells because they don't know who, what, when, where, why, and how the very next terrorist attack may happen. I was listening to one media source today, and they were saying, well, you know what? ISIS has all these websites up, and they're basically recruiting through websites. They're sending their propaganda around the world. They're displaying it on their websites. And I have a very simple question to all those in power. Why don't you just shut their damn websites off? You can do it. And if you guys can't, let's put a call into Korea. Hell, they hacked into the White House. They hacked into Sony. Why don't we get them to work with us and hack into ISIS? We'll be back on the other side of this commercial break as we continue here in the X-Zone with my good friend, Dr. David Gruder. His website is www.davidgruder.com. My name is Rob McConnell. This is the X-Zone. We're coming to you from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Don't go away. Welcome back, everyone. This is the X-Zone. I'm Rob McConnell, and we're coming to you on the X-Zone Broadcast Network and around the world from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Worldwide toll-free 800-610-7035. Email xzone@xzoneradiotv.com, on all social media sites, X-Zone Radio TV, and our website where you can listen to the X-Zone 724-365. at www.xzoneradiotv.com. And what's that you say? What happens if you're away from your computer and you want to listen to the show? Well, it's very simple. All you have to do is on any handheld device, dial 213-401-0080 and tune into the X-Zone on your telephone. But some charges may apply. Dr. David Gruder is my guest this hour. We're talking about the psychology of terrorists. His website is www.davidgruder.com. That's DAVIDGRUDER.com. David, before we went to the break, you were going to give us your definition of a terrorist.
Sure. Actually, I have a very simple definition of terrorism, and that is violent forms of coercion. So in order to understand what is going on this planet, we really have to understand what coercion means and how it's being used in daily life.
Okay. Proceed, Doctor.
Sure. I also want to add that there's something that drives me crazy about this whole issue of terrorism, because when I looked up terrorism on Wikipedia, their claim was that there's neither an academic nor an international legal consensus regarding the definition of the term terrorism. And without there being an agreed-upon definition of what terrorism is, how can we get a handle on what to do about it? When we look at terrorism simply as violent forms of coercion, then we start to open up our eyes to the ways in which the world today, in politics, in economics, in religion, in social agendas and special interests, is all about compelling by force, intimidation, authority, or manipulation. And that's what coercion is. We're in a coercion-based society and world today. And all that terrorism is the most extreme and heinous version of coercion.
David, why do you feel that it's so necessary for you to come out and talk against terrorism or talk about terrorism?
Well, Rob, it goes all the way back to 9/11. I was born and raised in the New York area. As you mentioned earlier, I live in San Diego.
Yeah.
But I happened to be back in the New York area helping my mom out, who was still alive at the time when 9/11 occurred. And I was so profoundly both traumatized by being there at when 9/11 occurred, and so profoundly moved by the New Yorkers' reactions to 9/11, that when I saw what the foreign policy statement was 3 weeks rather after 9/11 occurred, the U.S. foreign policy position, it was so the opposite of how the New Yorkers were reacting that something inside me snapped. And I became really furious, and not just furious at the powers that be, but furious at my own profession for not stepping forward to really take the bull by the horns and start talking bluntly and directly about the psychology of terrorism and what to do about terrorism from a psychological point of view.
Let me ask you this then. What can be done about terrorism from a psychological point of view?
Well, the first thing that I think we need to understand is what fuels terrorism, which is a really horrific psychological disorder, as far as I'm concerned, that I have for years now called fanaticism disorder. And I'm happy to go into the details about that, because when we understand fanaticism disorder, we can start to recognize the dynamics in us, in our communities, in our churches and synagogues and mosques, in all of our organizations that actually fuel fanaticism and that fuel coercion. Because once we get the handle on that, we can start turning things around.
How is it that ISIS is able to attract so many people into fighting for such a horrific cause?
Well, think about the societies, if you can call it that, because they're in such disarray, so I'm even hesitant to call them societies, but the geographical locations, countries in which ISIS is taking hold. You've got Syria, you've got Iraq, and these are countries that have been absolutely devastated societally by rampant government corruption. And so when you have extremist corruption going on, and you have a population that feels like they have been forced into a state of what we call in psychology learned helplessness, the belief that there's nothing they can do about their situation. And then a group comes along that says the solution to corruption is that we are going to regain our morality, and the only way to regain morality is this absolutely insane perversion of Islam. But we're not going to tell you it's an insane perversion of Islam. We're going to tell you that it's the one true Islam, and if you sign up with us, we will eradicate the corruption that's destroying your lives. What do you think those people are going to do?
Oh, I can understand it for the people over there, but why would people from the United Kingdom, France, Germany, the United States, and Canada want to join ISIS? This just boggles my imagination.
Well, this is the harder part to look at, and this is why people don't look at fanaticism disorder. In the United States, corruption is profoundly massive. And in a lot of westernized countries, there's institutionalized corruption that outsiders or people who haven't been taken in by the propaganda that somehow makes corruption okay, they say, well, this society is really screwed up too. So maybe the solution is extremist Islam or fanatical Christianity, because we don't have to go over to the Middle East in order to see this insanity. We can see fanaticism disorder in Christians and Jews.
So is this one of society's dirty little secrets, that this actually exists, and why isn't something being done about it?
Yeah, I think it is a dirty little secret that this exists, and it exists in our minds as individuals, in our families, in our communities, in our groups. And why don't we talk about it? Well, because there's really no accepted term like fanaticism disorder, and when there's no term for a phenomenon that's going on, it can't be talked about. There's no conscious way to talk about it or get an upper hand on it. Linguists call that an empty category.
Something that a lot of people don't realize is that the number of conversions to Islam in prison is phenomenal. Basically, prisons and penitentiaries are a wonderful recruiting center for conversion to Islam. Is this psychology the same as we were talking about why people go and fight for ISIS?
Well, think about how the majority of people who end up in prison end up there. It's because they have committed or have been convicted of committing a crime that was a form of coercion. And so they're in there because coercion is something they're very familiar with. And when a coercive tactic comes along, like fanatical Islam, to convert people to Islam, to recruit them into violence and coercion, that's a language that people who have been convicted of coercion understand.
So they become basically they're fed a line of bull in order to get them to go from one side to the other, because they've already shown that they're rebellious towards society in one way or another. They're easy pickings.
That's right. They're easy pickings, and they're looking for answers. They're not finding those answers in mainstream ways, so they look outside the mainstream for those answers.
So how do we change? Where do we start, David? Where do we start? If we know that there is a psychological problem, how do we go about fixing it? Or has it gone past the point of no return?
No, I don't think it's gone past the point of no return, although I do believe that we could get there, but I don't think we're there yet. I think that, decades ago there was a comic strip called Pogo, written by a wonderful cartoonist named Walt Kelly. And the character Pogo is very famous for the line, "We've met the enemy and he is us." Well, we've met the coercers and they are us. When we point the finger out there and talk about the evil and the ugliness in extremist Islam, which it's there.
Right.
But when we focus on that, we're giving ourselves a pass card on recognizing the ways we're doing the same things that they're doing, even in less dramatic forms than how they're doing it.
So
we're tolerant of coercion.
So we can't see the forest for the trees.
Yeah, exactly. You know, the violence, which is all about, terrorism is violent coercion. But there's physical violent coercion and there's psychological violent coercion. And psychological violence includes brainwashing, shaming, and threatening violence. And it also includes the game called the ends justifies the means.
That almost sounds like spousal abuse, the cycles.
Yeah, it is spousal abuse. It is sexual harassment. Yeah. It is all of these things that we say are wrong and bad in our society, but we do anyway. We do it in politics.
All right, David, sorry about that. We've got to take our news break at the bottom of the hour. X-Zone Nation, Dr. David Gruder is our special guest. The Psychology of a Terrorist, this hour here in the X-Zone. For more information about Dr. Gruder, his books, and so much more, visit his website at www.davidgruder.com. That's www.davidgruder.com. And we'll be back on the other side of this commercial break with the news as we continue here in the X-Zone from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Don't go away. Welcome back, everyone. Dr. David Gruder is my guest, www.davidgruder.com. We're talking about the psychology of a terrorist. First of all, David, always great having you on the show. But I have to ask you, what would make a person want to face a situation where the chances of them getting killed are very likely? For example, somebody from Canada gets recruited to go to Syria to join ISIS. They have no idea what the military life is like. Bang, they find themselves in the middle of a confrontation. Yet when they go there, they know that the chances are very good that they're not going to be coming back, that they're going to be killed. What happens to a sane person that clicks in their mind where they really don't give a care about life anymore?
There's nothing more powerful than giving a hopeless person a cause. So when someone's hopeless that they're never going to see a better life, then the mindset is often one where it's going to be better to go out in a blaze of glory than to die an anonymous death.
Wow. And I guess we see this when criminals deliberately go out to get themselves killed by police officers. And it seems that this dirty little secret that you and I are talking about this hour that influences terrorists, people that are involved in spousal abuse, can we also point our finger at this and say, all right, bullying is also part of this?
Yes, bullying is a form of psychological terrorism. Because terrorism is all about threatening people. It's about scaring people into compliance with whatever you want them to comply with.
So once again, let me ask you the question. Where do we start to turn the tide around? Is it better education within our school systems? Is it bringing this 300-pound gorilla out of the closet? How do we do it, in your opinion?
I think we start by bringing the 300-pound gorilla out of the closet, as you say, and rightly say, by taking a cold, hard look at one of the dynamics that keeps fanaticism and terrorism alive, and that is that people inside of, moderate, mainstream people inside of any political, ideological, or religious group, or ethnic group for that matter, they give pass cards, as it were, to the extremists in their group. Oh, I can understand why they're so angry, why they're so extreme. And when we refuse to clean up our own families, the fanatics and the terrorists in our own families, and instead start pointing the finger at other groups for their fanatics and terrorists, we actually feed the flames rather than cause the flames to die down.
The fact that the Western countries are so politically correct, does this aid in that decision?
Think about what political correctness is. Political correctness is a fake, false facade that's an attempt at regulating people into human kindness because we're not humanly kind to each other.
Right.
Human kindness shouldn't have to be regulated. Political correctness is a sham. People who are authentically loving don't need political correctness.
So basically, if I understand what we're saying, is that political correctness is a type of mind control into making us do certain things that otherwise we wouldn't do. And because it's politically correct, or somebody says it's politically correct to do this, we feel obligated. But doesn't resentment start after a while because we feel as if we're being pressed and forced into doing something that we don't feel right about doing?
You're spot on, Rob, spot on. So when we start rebelling, then we either will start doing the opposite of that in private, or we will find some other group out there that will project our rage and our resentment onto, and will attack and criticize them for being out of line so we don't have to face ourselves.
Wow, I can think of one group like that right away, going back into the early days of the racial situation in the United States, the Ku Klux Klan.
You got it.
You know,
That's right.
so
And
here we have ISIS, and even though you've got moderate Muslims saying that they're against what ISIS is doing, ISIS is advancing their cause, advancing their religion, so they're pointing at ISIS as being the bad guys, even though they're saying maybe to themselves, yay.
they may be saying to themselves, yay, or they may be saying, I don't know what to do
Yeah.
as a moderate other than speak out against it, because if I look at the political climate in those countries, there's no doorway in, because I can't make social change through the existing government because the existing government is too corrupt. So they've got their hands tied.
So when we look at the situation in Europe where certain countries are faced with communities within their cities where Sharia law is in place, and you've got law enforcement and government officials who refuse to go into that area because they're basically lawless unless Sharia law is enforced. How do we, like, when I look at this, I can't understand why they just haven't gone in and rectified the situation, because as far as I'm concerned, what they're doing is allowing it to grow, and they're showing that they're really afraid of what is going on.
Yeah. And they are afraid of what is going on because they really don't understand the dynamics. These people in positions of power, in government, in economic groups, they tend to have a very disdainful attitude about psychology, thinking that psychology is a bunch of self-absorbed narcissists rather than really people who have expertise. At least certain of my colleagues and I have expertise in social change strategies.
Well, how can they say that when the top law enforcement agencies in the world use psychological profilers to catch criminals? You know, that when people say, well, it's not, psychology has nothing to do with it, come on. The FBI, RCMP, Interpol, MI5, Scotland Yard each have professional profilers. Profiling is used, or psychological profiling is used by Homeland Security. So, how can on one hand they say it doesn't exist, it doesn't work, and yet everyone else knows it does?
They're using profiling to predict future behavior.
Yep.
They're not using psychological principles to change the architecture of cultural dynamics.
All right, so there's no brainwashing involved. It's just watching the person based on past and present actions?
Yeah, it's predicting the future based on current and past behaviors. And this is, you see, think about it this way.
Okay.
We live in a society where the fake news media, which you're not part of, thank God, which is why I'm on your show, but the fake news media engages in a form of supposed reporting that's actually a tactic that was developed by the father of modern public relations, whose name was Edward Bernays, and the tactic that what Bernays called the tactic is manufactured consent. It's the use of propaganda to manipulate public opinion. So when you got the media engaging in that kind of psychological terrorism and calling it journalism, what do you expect the public to think?
Because, I'm going to say it, the media brainwashes people. It really does. There are people who, just because it says so on the internet, it's got to be true. Just because it was said on ABC or any of the other 3 or 4 alphabet media outlets, it has to be true.
The fake media brainwashes people.
Yeah.
The authentic media educate people, help people become better at critical thinking and at discernment so that they can make educated, intelligent decisions on their own behalfs and in service of highest good.
The now saying in the media is, if it don't bleed, it don't lead. Sensationalism sells. Like
Yeah. How do you think that affects people's attitudes about terrorism? If sensationalism sells, and I have no sense of purpose or meaning or in my life, and no hope that it'll be different in the future,
Right.
why shouldn't I be pursuing something sensational?
Getting my own 15 minutes of fame.
Yeah.
You know, or either that or ending up with 69 virgins. And why anybody would want 69 virgins is beyond me, David. I can't understand that way of thinking at all.
Neither me.
Yeah. How does the psychological effect that we've been talking about when it concerns terrorism and those who want to further the cause because basically it's the only bright light in their lives at the time, how does this compare to what other religions are doing in the world? Are they doing it the same way except without the terrorist aspect?
Well, think about what the extreme Christian right is trying to do. The extreme Christian right is trying to, in the United States, is trying to rewrite the U.S. Constitution in ways that it wasn't written. So they're going to impose their ideology, their equivalent of Sharia law on the citizens of a country.
Wow.
Think about what the radical extremist Jews in Israel are doing. And the mainstream Christians, the majority of Christians, the mainstream Jews, the majority of Jews in North America and in Israel have a very different mindset from the extremist nutcases, but they have sympathy toward them. They give them pass cards.
Let me ask you this. Has it come to a time in the evolution of humanity and the human species that religion has run its course, that we really don't need religion anymore in any way? And is it possible that if religion was to cease, that we as a human race could possibly find the peace that we're all looking for?
You know, many decades ago now, one of the very influential behind-the-scenes people in the human potential movement, a man by the name of Alan Dorman, who was Catholic, said the following: Christianity, great concept, never been tried. So when we look at the question of have we outgrown religion, what we've outgrown is coercion, manipulation, control, and sheepism masquerading as religion. Some people are very, very resonant with and nourished by ritual and tradition. And healthy religion offers that to those individuals. Does that mean that all individuals need their spiritual sustenance from a formal religious path?
Right.
I think the answer is no. But I wouldn't want to take that away from people who resonate with that way.
Sure. I understand that, but I also can see the usefulness of religion when it comes to the retail industry and certain manufacturing outlets, because Easter, Christmas, and other religious holidays are big money makers, not just for the church, but for industry as well. Now, if the money that was made on these so-called religious holidays was given to the poor, given to the homeless, given to the people to whom I've always believed that the religious philosophies were doing all this good work for, I could understand it. If the Vatican was to sell all its property and give the money to the poor, I could see it. But it seems that the rich are getting richer and the poorer are still poor.
So think about this in the context of coercion. This is a form of coercion. That's not religion. That's coercion masquerading as religion.
Well, then I can honestly say that advertising on TV is coercion.
It is.
Yeah.
There are two very different approaches to selling. Both are equally effective. One was called by the father of modern public relations manufactured consent, which is fundamentally unethical. And the other form of selling is collaborative, informed consent selling, which is the process of selling through helping people determine what is right matched to appropriate needs that they've got. It's just as effective as manufactured consent, but it's not used because it's not efficacious, it's not easy, it's not simple. It requires people to start thinking for themselves.
And of course, we don't want people to start thinking for themselves.
No, we don't.
No.
That's coercion.
David, you and I have to take our final break for this hour, my friend. Please stand by. Exonation, my friend. Dr. David Gruder is our special guest this hour. His website is davidgruder.com. That's www.davidgruder.com. And we'll both be back on the other side of this commercial break as we continue here in the X Zone from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. If you'd like to send us an email, if you have an idea for a show, if there's a guest you'd like us to get on, my email address is xzone@xzoneradiotv.com. The X Zone, a place where people dare to believe and dare to be heard on the X Zone Broadcast Network and now on Simul TV. We'll be back on the other side of this short break. Don't go away. Exonation Dr. David Gruder is our special guest this hour. www.davidgruder.com. First of all, David, thanks so much for coming on the show tonight. Tell our listeners about your books.
Well, the book of mine that is most connected to our discussion is a book on integrity called The New IQ, How Integrity Intelligence Serves You and Our Relationships and Our World. The next book that I'm in the process of working on, that's even more related to our topic tonight, is a book called The Hijacking of Happiness. And I have started to build, and it is available, a free website called hijackingofhappiness.com that is capturing the essence of the material that I am covering in my next book. And it really speaks to the dynamics that make terrorism so tolerated and reinforced in the world today.
So, based on what we've been talking about for the past hour, coercion, is that the biggest problem we faced?
I think it is. There are three fundamental styles of negotiation and problem solving: coercion, compromise, and collaboration or synergy. Two of those three are fully dysfunctional styles, and those are coercion and compromise, because compromise simply means the best that we can do is walk away from the negotiating table feeling equally ripped off. Until we master the art of cooperation and collaboration and synergy, we will continue to see coercion run roughshod over cultural well-being and individual well-being, and terrorism will continue to flourish.
There's got to be a way that we can solve this problem, David. I guess I've always looked at a glass and said it's half full. It's not half empty. I've always looked at the scenario where somebody says, well, that person's just a bad apple. Well, yeah, but even a bad apple has good seeds in it, and you plant those seeds. You don't get a tree that grows with bad apples. You get a tree that grows with good apples. Are we taking enough time in our busy society, our busy lives, to actually put the hard work into this problem that it so rightfully deserves?
No, I don't think we are, and it makes me sad because after 9/11, I wrote a document called a Declaration of Global Responsibility that outlines 10 principles for responding to terrorism and fanaticism in an integrated way, and it still hasn't been adopted.
Why not?
Because I think it requires people to look too closely at themselves, and that makes people uncomfortable. They'd rather have an enemy to point the finger at so they don't have to see those things in themselves and deal with it close to home.
Reminds me of the Michael Jackson song, Man in the Mirror.
Yes, indeed.
As always, David, time with you, my friend, goes by so fast. Tell our listeners how they can find out more about you, and are you going to be speaking anywhere?
Oh, well, thank you. The best way to find out more about me is through davidgruder.com. And yeah, I'm speaking places at the moment. They're all private gigs rather than open to the public, so I don't have anything to publicize other than if people want to bring me to their conference or business or government group to speak or train for them, they can certainly contact me.
David Gruder, thanks very much for being with us this hour. And we'll have to have you back on, because this is a very important topic, and together, you and I and our listeners, I'm sure we can all make a difference.
Yes, I agree.
Take care, my good friend. X-Zone Nation, Dr. David Gruder has been my guest this hour. www.davidgruder.com. And like I've said many, many, many times, if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. And who wants to be part of a problem? I myself, let's work on solutions together, all together. It starts with Dr. Gruder, myself, and you. We'll be back on the other side of this commercial break with the news at 6.5 minutes past the hour as we continue here in the X-Zone. Don't go away.